Ladies and gentlemen, and every gender in between, welcome to Gender Revolution, the YouTube channel dedicated to the normalisation of transgender in contemporary Western society. My name is Julie Miller. I am a transgender speaker and educator, and I specialise in analysing transgender scientific and cultural research and converting it into easy to understand videos for non-transgender people to learn about the wonderful world of transgender. In this video, I will be taking a potted historical tour through the science of gender and transgender, and then focusing on the current theories for the transgender state of being. The reference material I have used is a book called The Psychobiology of Transsexualism and Transgenderism by Professor Thomas Bevan, which is available on Amazon. Society's interest in analysing sex and sexual behaviour gathered pace in the late 19th and early 20th century, with the new medical tools and techniques that were a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, and inquisitive doctors wanted to understand more about the concepts of human sexual behaviour. And for example, why there were people who appeared to be more attracted to people of the same sex. The German physician Magnus Hirschfeld was a very prominent doctor and psychologist, and his efforts and discoveries gained worldwide recognition, publishing his first Journal of Sexology in 1908. He was known as the Einstein of sex, and he was a founding member of the World League for Sexual Reform in 1928. He set up the first Institute of Sexology in Berlin. Sadly though, the prevailing culture of his time was totally unaccepting of people who did not fit society's rigid norms, and in 1933 his research papers were destroyed by the Nazis, and the Institute of Sexology was closed down and the World League for Sexual Reform was disbanded. But research into human sexology continued across the world, and in 1955 the prominent psychologist Professor John Money of the Johns Hopkins University published a paper that defined the words sex and gender as two different aspects of human sexology, and he coined the phrase gender role. And it was here that the science of sex and gender diversified, and they were analysed as two separate disciplines. The scientific community then focused on the human mind and behaviour in respect to understanding gender, as opposed to analysing sexual organs. Science now points to four possible reasons why transgender people exist, and these are: firstly, genetics and DNA; secondly, epigenetics, which are mechanisms that modify DNA. For example, prenatal exposure to drugs, toxic chemicals, prenatal stress. The third reason is the effect of mental issues, for example, childhood traumas. And fourthly, there is cultural upbringing. Now, in respect to the last two in this list, the effect of other mental issues and cultural upbringing, research in the past few decades has analysed many children, both transgender and non-transgender, and it has been concluded that there is no scientific evidence that shows transgender is the result of other mental issues or cultural upbringing. Any mental issues experienced by transgender children are normally the result of the stresses caused by being brought up in a hostile and unforgiving binary gendered culture. And the fact that many trans children become aware as early as 4 years old that their gender behaviour is different to cultural expectations means there is little time for the prevailing culture to influence their behaviour in respect to gender norms. Evidence is now pointing overwhelmingly to the first two reasons: genetics and epigenetics, in what is described by Professor Bevan as the two-factor theory. There is a significant body of evidence that shows that a person's genes and the manner in which these genes are expressed results in a baby being born with brain structures and neurological pathways that make them display gendered characteristics which differ from those that their prevailing society finds acceptable. In other words, a baby born male may display the gender traits normally associated with girls, and vice versa for a baby born female. There is evidence from many scientific studies of transgender people that suggest this two-factor theory. For example, studies show that transgender people are more likely to be left-handed. Female to male transgender people are likely to have more maternal aunts than uncles. For a trans person who is a twin, there is a significant incidence of the other twin also being transgender. The earliest awareness of transgender behaviour is from the age of 4, which is too early for parental upbringing to influence behaviour. Certain structures of the brain have been observed to have different sizes for transgender people compared to non-transgender people. And children who are aware of being transgender as early as 4 years old do not display mental disorders above and beyond those of non-transgender children. Being transgender is not rare, and it exists in many other societies of the non-Western world. But for a binary gendered society like ours to accept the science of transgender and the enormous cultural changes associated with becoming a multi-gendered society means that the scientific proof must be overwhelming, which currently it is not. We need scientific instruments and techniques that back up the studies and theories to show to the naked eye evidence that transgender people's minds are different to non-transgender people. These instruments are coming online, for example, magnetic resonance imaging, diffusion tensor imaging, positron emission tomography, near-infrared spectroscopy. And most important of all is the ability to examine and understand the roles of the genes contained in the DNA that defines our very existence. The application of these instruments and techniques by the scientific and medical community to transgender research is currently limited, as our society does not deem this subject area important enough for government funding. But the financial burden of transgender people on the medical establishment is increasing exponentially in terms of visits to GPs, visits to gender identity clinics, the cost and administration of hormones and various surgical interventions, the cost of secondary mental health issues of transgender people, and the cost to the police of dealing with transphobic crimes. In order to reduce these costs, eventually government will need to focus on transgender research in order to understand and confirm beyond any reasonable doubt the science and psychobiology of the mind that results in the existence of transgender people. And from this, changes can be made to our laws and our culture so that we are more aligned with nature and science, and so that society and our Western culture is more accepting of transgender people. My name is Julie Miller from genderrevolution.co.uk. Thank you for watching this video.